Now what we're going to do is go and remove an old aquarium that's leaked, and then we're going to replace it with a nice brand new one. It's always worth buying a new aquarium, because when you buy an old aquarium, you're never that sure how old it really is. And in this case, the gentleman did buy it off someone else, who he then later on found, once it leaked, that person actually bought it off someone else. So we have no idea how old this tank is, and so therefore the fact that it leaked is just a part of life. If you buy a second-hand aquarium, particularly these rimless, braceless ones, what you need to be aware of is that you are buying risk, because with silicon, the silicon actually settles. So you basically put the aquarium in a position, and even if you do have the foam underneath, and even if you do level it relatively well, there's still a certain angle that the glass is going to be in. And if it's a brand new tank and it's never held water before, then it will basically flex to a degree within the silicon itself to allow it to settle. Now the problem with a second-hand aquarium is that it's already done that. So if you're unlucky and it's sort of settled just slightly on that angle, and then you move it to a new position, and then it's settling slightly on that angle, despite your best efforts to level it, and then in this case it's actually a third-hand tank, so therefore that's happened again. So then with these tanks, the most important thing is they have to be completely level, because there's no forgiveness, because there's no bridges, there's no braces, there's just silicon seal. And then also with these really nice looking aquariums, a lot of them are black silicon, which have a slightly lower tensile strength than the clear silicon. Now in this aquarium, it's let go here. And if you look carefully, you look at the jet black silicon, that's silicon that is well adhered. And then if you look up here, you'll see the grey in the silicon. And that grey in the silicon means the silicon's let go. And in this case, you could see the water coming out. So in a perfect world, buy yourself a new tank. Make sure it's completely level, and that's the safest thing you can do. If you do get a second-hand tank, you really don't want to pay much for it, because you are getting more risk. If you are getting an old aquarium, you really want it for free, because you are buying risk. So you want to make sure you look at the silicon, make sure it's nice and jet black or clear or constant. You want to make sure you're not seeing this, because that's a sign of it letting go. And then depending on the quality of the silicon they've used, generally anywhere between 10, 20 years, depending on the silicon and depending on how well they've cleaned the surface, for how long silicon will actually last. Anyway, if you've got any tips on this subject, put a little note on the bottom of this video. When you put a new cabinet in position, the very first thing you want to do is make sure there's no rocking. So if you put your hand and it doesn't rock, then you're pretty much, that's the best of it. Then once it's in position, you want to put a level on it and make sure it is actually level. If it's got a rock in it, then you're really worried about it, because what you don't want is high points, because that's a great way of cracking your tank. So if there's no rock, that's a good thing, or very, very little rock. If there is rock, then you need to level it, chuck a level on it, and then you figure out where you need to pack it to make sure that you're confident that it's flat. In a nice new house like this, then assumably the floors would be more level than a super old house, which has had more time to deteriorate. So making sure you're confident the base is nice and level, and that you've got something absorptive to put the tank on is the first thing you want to do to make sure the tank doesn't crack. Now, while it's super important that you level your aquarium, it's also important to be aware of where the sump is going to be, because quite often if you install sumps into dodgy stands where there might be, say, a cross brace there and then no cross braces, it is quite common for the sump to be the thing to crack, because you often don't put the same care for the sump as you do the tank, but you really need to, because they're both glass and both of them will crack if put on an imbalanced, unlevel surface. The other thing you need to do when you install a tank is check the doors, because sometimes you do have to adjust the hinges just to make sure the hinges line up properly. And then Bob's your uncle. Or he might not be, he might be your mum's new boyfriend, how would I know?